guys like my shirt? Welcome to the Panic Room, guys, and our first ever book review. I wanted to start doing book reviews on this channel because, I don't read near as much as I used to, or near as much as I want to. And if you watched my 13 Reasons Why I Smile video, books are one of my favorite things in the world. So I wanted to give myself a reason to read more. And I thought, hey, maybe we can have a little discussion. Some of my favorite genres are, anything horror, dystopian, fantasy, thriller, suspense, anything in that realm. I'm here for it. I love it. So what I did was I Googled, I think it was on Goodreads, I Googled the top horror novels that were coming out in 2020. And of course, some had already came out, some were getting ready to, and I was just scrolling through. And one that piqued my interest was the one we're talking about today, which is Brian Pinkerton's The Nirvana Effect. So I thought, we could just do a little overview of the story first, and then maybe get into a breakdown of what we thought. Obviously, spoiler alerts. If you want to read this book, you might want to come back afterwards. We are going to be talking about some plot points here, so spoilers, obviously. Let's talk about what the book looks like. Obviously, this is one of the main reasons you pick up a book, so I thought, let's talk about the cover. I got super Matrixy looking vibes from this. Did you guys get that? I mean, it's definitely, you can tell it's going to be like a techie book, right? So one of the funny reasons why I picked this book was the blurb made me think like this book was definitely about what was going on in 2020, because the very first line is, no one goes out anymore. We had some pandemic influence right off the bat, right? When I was reading through kind of like the blurb about the book, it does seem like it's going to be very dystopian. So that was another reason that I kind of was drawn to this book. And sure enough, it checked all the boxes for a dystopian novel for me. So just a quick rundown. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time here because I do think you should go read this book. It's not very thick. It's only like 250 pages. I got through it in 2 days. I know I'm a fast reader, but I really think this is definitely doable for most people. So our main character we meet right off the bat is Aaron. He's a 20-something landscaper. He is definitely against this new technology that they call the chip, which is pretty much exactly what you're thinking. It's a chip that's inserted at the base of the brain, between the brain and the spine, and you can pretty much download experiences. And when I say experiences, I literally mean anything. Anything you can think of. From, the really crazy out there fantasy kind of stuff to something as simple as having a martini. No joke. People are like having problems functioning in day-to-day society in this world because like they don't really eat food anymore. They eat these things called body fuel bars, and you download flavors to the chip. And they have hydration packs. Same deal. You just download flavors. They have, everything the body needs. Cute Idiocracy reference. And people just don't eat anymore. They're not doing basic functions. They're having to have alerts to go to the bathroom. And one thing this book does really, really well is describing smells. Like lots and lots of descriptions of smells. Things about like sour body odor because people don't want to shower anymore. People smelling like urine because they're not going to the bathroom. All these kind of things. Like it's really into describing smells. So Aaron, as a landscaper, he is a lover of the natural world. He is totally against the chip, and you find out why with his wife later on in the book. She was a chip addict, and a lot of things happened around that, which gives a lot of backstory as to why Aaron thinks the way he does. So later on in the book, we meet one of Aaron's, actually it's his client, Madison Redfield, one of those, who is a super wealthy former like movie mogul, right? But he's like in his 70s and 80s. And that whole generation is just rejecting the chip. Obviously, technology is always aimed at the younger generation, right? So you find out that there's this group of resistance that is kind of trying to push back against the chip. And Madison starts to gives Aaron funding to go find these people. However, before he leaves, Aaron meets up with our second main character, which is Clarissa. Now, I'm going to stop right here and say I did not care for Clarissa. I just didn't like her attitude, and I didn't like her even as the story went on. I just don't like her, and we'll get more into that when we break the story down, but I don't like her. And you find out, Clarissa is the same as him, not putting the chip in her body. She's all about, like, taking care of herself and not giving away her soul, which you see that kind of pop up in a lot of different ways throughout the book about, like, they think this is, like, a giving away of your soul and who you are as a human. And that's sort of left up to you to decide, is this a giving away of what makes you human, or is this just a technology? Which I think is cool. It's good that that was left open-ended for the reader. They take off, they have this big, like, cross-country journey. Meantime, we're having another character, Mark, who is super interesting because he is actually an employee of Dynamica, which is the huge company that made this chip. And when I say huge, I mean, like, think like Walmart, Amazon, but to the nth degree. Like, they are gigantic. They are the only pretty much company in the world in this universe. So, but he has like a crisis of conscience, and he leaves, and he has these amazing, encounters that just give you more insight as to what this world is about. For example, he is given a jammer which can kind of control anybody's chip, and that thing saves his ass so many times. Like, without that, this story would have been like 15 pages for Mark anyway. But yeah, like, he ends up like as forced labor in a steel mill. I mean, just crazy adventures, absolutely crazy adventures. And you get really into the idea of what makes people human and where our focus should be for life. Like, should our focus be on just feeling good and, chasing these fantasies and not really doing any work while we're here? And when I say work, I don't mean like you get up every day and go to a job. I mean like something that's going to matter to the world, making your mark, so to speak. I'm starting to lose some light. It's been rainy here a lot today, which is perfect for what we're talking about. Eventually, Aaron and Clarissa and Mark all meet up with a bunch of auxiliary characters, and, they start to flee because it gets so bad that they just decide they're going to flee into Canada. Because obviously in this world, the USA is the only one that's lost its mind with this chip right now. Of course, that goes awry, and there's a lot of things that happen. There's a character named Brandon that is super interesting, and he plays a really pivotal role in the book, which is super interesting, and his story arc is really cool because he, like, comes in and out at really interesting times, but not jarringly, if that makes sense. Like, he isn't just, like, thrown into the story. He sort of comes, like, weaving in and out of the story, and it's really cool the way the author did that, I think. Like, you don't see him coming in a lot of ways. I'm not going to say anything more than that. You got to read. So now let's get into some breakdowns of what happened. When I made my notes, I just went chapter by chapter, so I thought maybe that's what we could do. So, chapter 1. Same as with every book, we sort of just meet our character, Aaron. We meet his roommates, who are there are 3 of them, and they're just all, like, nasty chip addicts. It talks about how they stink. One of them has, like, an addiction to some, like, bootleg feeds because of course, in this world, Dynamica is the name of the company that makes the chip, but there's all these different, like, bootleg options. And the bootleg options sort of deal in some not very nice stuff, if you know what I mean. If you watched my Dark Skies review, you'll get this reference. They deal in a lot of squeak squeak kind of thing, and some dark squeak squeak kind of things. Yeah, so his roommate's into that, which, I mean, right off, you're just like, yeah, you're garbage. So, he talks about how they stink and how he hates living there, but, he doesn't have the money to leave and all this. So then in chapter 2, he goes to Madison Reddick's house and, talks to him, and he's a self-made millionaire. He did a lot of things with movies and just, like, tangible media that is just null and void now because nobody goes to the movies or reads books because everything can be downloaded to the chip, right? And they start talking about how, they hate this world and the technology and how it's ruining humanity. And then Madison starts telling him about this, like, resistance group and gives him this little pamphlet about it. So, Aaron's sort of lackluster. Okay, fine, yeah, I'll read about it. He goes back, and we see on his drive back home a little flashback about his wife, Wendy. And tell me what you guys thought about Wendy at this point. Because this whole idea of, like, living coffins, how morbid is that, right? So what I'm talking about is where everybody has this chip, there is apparently feeds, which is what they call what you can download, if I haven't said that already. There are feeds that are like suicide feeds that you download, and they're just this continual loop that you can't come out of, but your mind and body are still alive, right? So that's what this bitch did. She got mad at her husband because, he was calling her a chip addict, which she was, and downloads this like heaven feed. And so now he puts her in this, like, they call it something, but it's essentially like a morgue, but for living people. And tell me what you thought, because the first thing that popped in my mind was Mr. Freeze from the Batman Forever movie. With that little pod that he has to be in and to live. That's what I got. She's got wires and stuff hooked up to her, and we get this little flashback while he's visiting her, how, they had a lot of arguments around chips, and one day she disappears for 2 days, comes back, locks herself in the bathroom, boom, downloads this feed, and now Erin's having to pay for her ass to be entombed at this, like, living mortuary thing, and you get the name Dr. Delight. So apparently we know that this was not like a Dynamica authentic product that she downloaded. This was one of those like bootleg kind of feeds, right? So Erin is super upset. He vows from that point on that he just hates the chip, right? And that's sort of, you figure out like that's going to be his driving force kind of throughout this whole book. So later on in chapter 2, we meet Mark. And he is probably one of my favorite characters. I just loved his story arc. And you find out from him, through his perspective, that Dynamica and the U.S. government are going to combine forces because the U.S. wants a way to, like, track people. And, I mean, come on. Any idiot knows that this is awful. But everybody around him just thinks it's the coolest thing, and they're just worried about how much money they're going to be making. Where Mark is starting to have a crisis of conscience because he is, like, their main marketing guy. I think he's, like, C-level, what would that be? Chief Marketing Officer, I think. So CMO. He is just having this huge crisis of conscience the whole time. So he ends up getting to the point where he contacts the doctor that invented the chip, because the chip is like super easy to put in but really difficult to get out. So he ends up contacting this doctor and tricking him into taking his chip out. And he just gets the hell out of town. Like he just goes, he realizes he just has to leave. And there's these wonderful scenes that really give you insight into this universe, because like he quits his job and people are like, what the hell are you doing? And he tries to go to the bank because he's a millionaire, because he works at this company, and get a bunch of his money out, and he can't do it. But the real thing that makes me just love to follow this character's arc is because before he leaves, he has a buddy named Brandon, who is also at Dynamica. They worked like from the ground up together. And they meet at this jazz club, and Brandon gives him this thing that he calls a jammer. And what it does is like it will call up anybody's chip, because they all have like numbers. And it will call up anybody's chip, and you can send feeds to them and kind of jam them. So, for example, like if somebody was coming at you like with a knife or something, and you had one of these jammers, you could call up their chip, because it'll scan the area around you, and send them like sleep, and they'll just fall asleep. So you see how this can be super useful. And I'm going to tell you, if it wasn't for that thing, you tell me, how long do you think Mark would have lived without that thing? Because I'm thinking he would have died in like 10 minutes. If it wasn't for that jammer, there's no way his ass would have made it to the end of the book, because that thing saved him. Like, I stopped counting. It saved him so many times. So chapter 3, we see Erin getting back to his house, and there's actually a robber in his house. And you find out that like theft is a huge problem, because people can't afford to buy these different chip feeds that they want. And everybody's like zoned out, so you can just break in somebody's house and they could be sitting right there and they don't even know you're there. And so Erin gets super, super upset with his roommates. They have this big fight, and he just gets the hell out of Dodge too. Like he is like, I'm through with you all, I'm gonna go. And he ends up like having a picnic or something on the side of like a river in New York. And it talks about, again, I told you this book is all about smells. It talks about like the orange that he eats and things like that. And personally, I think the book probably went so ham no pun intended, on describing senses because of the subject matter and about how these people were having these experiences but not really, like they weren't really tasting food, they weren't really smelling, you know, the aromas of things or seeing sights. They were just, it was just all in their head. So I'm pretty sure that the author intended to really go in for like sensory description for that reason. Chapter 4, Mark, his chip is out. You know, he has this big run-in with what is essentially the Men in Black because, you know, the U.S. government is involved and you up and quit as a sea level right after you find out that there's going to be this big takeover. You know, they're going to want to talk to you. So again, he gets the hell out. The jammer thing saves him. He actually calls up like a bird feed. And this dude thinks he can fly and just jumps out a damn window. Like, okay. And we also see in chapter 4 that Aaron and Clarissa meet for the first time. Now, tell me what your first impression of Clarissa was, because I don't like her. I just don't like her attitude. I don't know. She just rubbed me the wrong way. She just did. And as the book went on, it didn't get any better. So chapter 6, we see that confrontation, you know, between Mark and the agents that I was talking about, and the bird guy jumping out the window. And yeah, he just runs, and you see his like preparation where he goes into hiding under a secret name and all of this. I mean, he's pretty smart about it. Like, you think, you know, okay, this guy might actually have a chance, you know, with all his backstory with Dynamica and everything that he knows. Maybe this guy can do it, you know, maybe he can actually get away from these people. So after Aaron meets Clarissa, we find out that Clarissa has a brother, and, you know, Aaron is done at this point. He just wants to get the hell out and go find these resistance group people, and he tells Clarissa, you know, hey, you should come with me. But Clarissa, she wants to go try and see if she can help her brother one last time. Again, we get like this big description about how things smell in this like tent community he's living in, and he just tells her to go to hell. But Aaron gets the bright idea, because he's sort of living in her brother's sort of living in like this seedy area, to see if her brother knows anything about this Dr. Delight dude that his wife bought her suicide feed from. And sure enough, he does. So chapter 8, in my notes, I just have Aaron goes insane. Because, not that it wasn't deserved, because he finds Dr. Delight, and you remember, Aaron is a landscaper. So he goes in, he tries to ask Dr. Delight, you know, is there any way to reverse the feed so my wife can wake up? And Dr. Delight pretty much is super rude to him, tells him to go to hell, and his security guard beats the shit out of him. The shit out of Aaron. So Aaron comes back the next day with like a damn landscaping tool, like a hedge trimmer kind of a deal, and just eviscerates them both. And then covers their body in gasoline, sets them on fire. I mean, hey, you know what? You deal dirty, you get dirty dealt, right? Chapter 9, we see Mark going to the bank to try to get some of his millions out. And this was really cool because we really got to see some of how intricate the jammer technology can get. We saw him jam the dude's feed when he made him think he was a bird. But at the bank, you know, they're trying to give him the runaround to get his money out. And he starts to manipulate the teller's chip to just agree with him. Like, there are feeds out there that will just make you more agreeable. Really? Like, people are just okay with this? I mean, obviously, that is straight up mind control. So chapter 10, a lot of these chapters are really short, but they give like little bursts of like glimpses into this world. Chapter 10, we see like a man in black show up at Aaron's old house with the roommates, and you find out that the government is now going to have an incentive that if you know somebody who doesn't have the chip and you turn them in, you get like $1,000. I mean, that is totally believable, right? So you find out that the roommates get told about this and they're like, oh, well, he's never going to do it. But then in chapter 11, you know, Clarissa and Aaron are packing up so that they can go find this resistance group. And when Aaron shows up at the house to get his shit, a big fight ensues and they try to call and turn him in so that they can get this money, obviously to spend it on more chip feeds. Of course, Aaron and Clarissa get away, and in chapter 12, you see Mark is on the run. You know, he's got this apartment under an assumed name, and he is just craving human interaction. He's getting super high levels of cabin fever, and he starts to volunteer at an animal shelter. And this was probably one of the most tragic parts for me. You find out that there are feeds to make you get like the feel-good feelings of having a pet. So people's pets are just being neglected and turned out. You like, there's cats and dogs living together. No. There's just all these pets that don't have families anymore because their owners are chip addicts or whatever, and they can just download feeds for a cat or download a feed about a dog. And that's super sad. Like, I wouldn't have even thought of that. Like, how sick is that, just to like leave your animal to starve to death because you are on some virtual reality trip, right? So before Aaron and Clarissa leave LA, he wants to go sort of say goodbye to his rich movie mogul buddy, Madison, who has given him all this money to kind of go across country and find these people. And while they're there at the house, they hear a big bang, like a gunshot. And when they break in to make sure Madison's okay, he has committed suicide. But after they leave, these government officials come out and they're like, oh yeah, we weren't seen. You know, they believed it was a suicide. You know, we killed the main backer of the resistance. Now we're going to go on and get his kids. So you find out the government is definitely taking the offensive against these resistance people. Like, things are amping up, you know, it's not just like, hey, we really want you to get this chip, it's, hey, we really want you to get this chip. So then in the book, we flash forward, it's a year later, and we come in on just this random family, and it's a grandfather, grandmother, mother, father, and a little 8-year-old boy. And all of a sudden, like, the government shows up at the door, and everybody gets into this, like, secret door behind the pantry, except for the mom and dad. And the mom and dad start to lie to the government officials because they're like, we know that, you know, there are 2 elderly people and a child that live here that aren't chipped. And, you know, if you just tell us where they are, we won't hurt you. And they start to torture these people, like sending feeds to their chips, you know, via their little jammer thing, because now the government has that, you know, whatever. And they start to torture them, trying to get them to tell them where they are. And the grandfather kind of just comes out and is like, okay, that's enough. I can't see my kid get tortured just to try to save me. And so now you find out that they're literally tracking people down to put this chip in. Children, babies, it talks about how like they're chipping newborns and stuff, things like that. And instead of having like a surgery the way it was a year ago, now they just have this gun that they point to the back of your neck and beep, and you are chipped. And now it's not just hard to remove it, it's impossible. Like, it's fatal by design. Like, you cannot remove this. So that's super tragic, but again, it's just that little like glimpse into the universe that we're dealing with now. So chapters 15 and 16, we kind of get how Aaron and Clarissa they've set up in this library. They have this little group of resistance kind of going on here, and it's kind of like a Matrix situation almost. You know, there's this little band of fighters, and they're just sort of trying to live a normal life, and you find out that there are inners and outers, and inners are people who have rejected the chip but have it, and outers are ones that never had the chip. And in a really odd kind of way, they describe how one of the people in their library has came up with this technology to block the chip feed. And you see him like go pick up these new recruits, and it's a mom and her 15-year-old son, and they're having to wear like helmets, and there's parts of the library that have this sheet over it that if you're under it and you have the chip, it blocks your feed and you can't be seen or downloaded or whatever. And yeah, the 15-year-old, as soon as I heard he was 15 years old, I was like, this is a problem. There's no way that he's going to be like cool with just staying in a library for the rest of his life. Like, come on. Sure enough, he wants to smoke a little bit, and he's like, oh, and he has the chip, by the way, him and his mom both do, and he's like, oh, I'll just pop outside for a second. Well, then you find out that now, a year later, the whole government oversight thing is in full effect, and they have these big, think like, you know in the movies where it shows like government, like data collection, and there's these huge screens with points of light all over them? That's what I got from that. Because they said that they can observe anybody anywhere because it's like a little point of light and they can see you moving around, almost like a Sims. So sure enough, his point of light pops back on, and they're like, what the hell? You know, because you see that they've been dealing with these lights going out in people's chips, what they thought were malfunctioning. But now they know that's not the case. But the library guys, you know, Aaron and everybody else, come up with this really pretty ingenious idea. where they take the kid and just take him around town in this van, because the van blocks his signal, and they just take him around town so his light will pop on over here and then go out, and then pop on over there and then go out. So it's like this big wild goose chase for the government, because they want the government to think like there's actually something wrong with the chips, which they're not really buying. They pretty much know that there is something going on with the resistance, and they are hardcore trying to stamp it out. Right after that, you think like, whew, we got away. There's these other new recruits, the Worthingtons, a husband and wife. The wife doesn't have a chip, the husband does. You find out that the husband was a former chip addict. Did anybody else think like, this is not a good idea? Because during their little acceptance, you find out that there are like 3 other chip addicts in this library. And I'm like, that's a pretty low number. Probably because they know it's super hard to get off the chip. Sure enough, dude is not off the chip. He's addicted to this thing called Cloud 10, and it's just pretty much like feel-good feelings. So obviously he's in this area of the chipped people under that cover that blocks the signal. So he just gets the idea, well, I'll just pop out for a second, right? Ass gets busted. And I knew as soon as it said, tell me, did you know he was going to turn? Because I did. I knew as soon as it said he was busted, and that guy came in and was offering him cloud, because the thing he was addicted to was called Cloud 10, and the guy that came in said, oh, well, they're coming out with Cloud 11. And I knew, we're done. We're done. He's going to turn tail. And sure enough, he did. Gave him everything. Library gets raided. Tons of people get killed. And we get introduced to these 2 like auxiliary characters. Max, who is a elderly gentleman who collects guns. He's a badass. He is a badass. I loved him. And then Gertrude, who is also a badass. She's like in her 70s. And there's not a whole lot about Gertrude. But what is there about Gertrude? I'm like, way to go. Way to go, woman. So we're on to chapter 19. And we see Aaron and Clarissa are on the run, and you find out that the library was actually blown up. And later you find out that it was Gertrude, the little 70-year-old woman who is now dating Max. How adorable is that? Who blew up the library. And she's like, sometimes you gotta make a statement. I love it. I love it. I love it so much. I aspire to be that kind of old woman one day. And also in chapter 19, Sam, our little snitch, gets shot. And I swear to you, the only thing that came into my mind when they shot him were, snitches get stitches, bitch. You just killed a ton of people because you wanted a high. Come on. So then we get this chapter all about, and it's another one of those short chapters. I think it's chapter 21, I'm pretty sure. About Flynn, the 15-year-old boy that almost got everybody killed over some weed. And his mom. And you find out that in the raid, they got away, but they got busted. So they're on a prison bus, but the prison they're going to is for chipped people. And get this is just morbid. They're going out to the middle of the desert, and there's this fenced in area. And what they do is they just download, I think they called it dim bulb. And it just makes your brain super sluggish. And the way they described it, it was like just a bunch of people milling around a field all day long, all night long, like cows. And you don't know who you are, you don't know who anybody is, and you just walk around. And that's your jail. I mean, what kind of hell would that be? Holy crap, man. Like that. And on the way there, as if that's not bad enough, on the way there, somebody on the bus that's going to this jail with him kills himself by ripping out his own chip. Blood splurting everywhere. Oh, it was, wow. It was just something. But I was taken aback at that jail. How sinister is that, right? We're flash forward to a year later. Up until now, there has been a little bit of hope in the government by this guy named Senator Sheridan. And, he's just anti-chip, right? So a year passes, and you find out that he is now president because when the library blew up, he used that as a political, cue to just take over. He just barged in and took over the Oval Office, right? So I was like, whoa, that's awesome, right? End of the book, but we had too much book left. We have 10 chapters left. I knew it couldn't be that easy. Again, predictable, but still a good story. So you find out that when he takes power and gets in office, and he had been shot at like an anti-chip rally, so he's in a wheelchair now. But when he gets into the office, he doesn't like make the chip illegal. He decides that instead of using it like for entertainment purposes, he's going to take back everything, and make the country amazing again. But he's going to do it by he outlaws like all the entertainment and fun stuff, pretty much. Like not all of it, but a lot of it. The stuff that was making people like really sloth-like. And he's using it as like this call to duty. Like for example, he decides that he's going to revamp all these industries that had went under due to the chip, and like the steel industry, for example, because that comes up later. He just sends out this signal to people like within, 300-mile radius of a steel mill, and it's just like, okay, you have to report here now, you work here now. Essentially slave labor, right? And yeah, that's essentially what he's doing. He's going to do it with the military. Like if you are in the military and you might have some feelings of fear or doubt, like he just sends a signal to your chip that makes you want to be like a bloodthirsty monster. And that's the way he's going to like make your country better. No. No. Like, it's essentially just swinging to the other side, right? Like, now he's just a tyrant. He's still not letting people make their own choices, except now instead of, like, making the choice just to be a fat, lazy piece of shit, now you're not having a choice as to be a slave. So, yeah, it's the coin is the same. It's just the opposite side. So we kind of get more info about this via Mark's experience at the steel mill. And he's just driving on his way to meet these resistance people. I think it's in Michigan. I'm pretty sure it's Michigan. And he just gets like sucked into like this traffic jam of all these people having to report to the steel mill. And he hijacks one of the Dynamica people who's making like this big speech. And the speeches are awesome. It's all like, trust us, we want to take care of you, kind of deal. And it's very like robots from the Matrix. Like, we're just taking care of humans. You guys are too stupid to take care of yourselves. Let us do it. You get a lot of that in this book. So he hijacks one of their phones and he calls up his buddy Brandon. If you remember, the one that gave him the jammer. And it's just like, screw you. You are awful. You're a terrible human being, for letting this happen. And the guy's like, dude, I'm not letting it happen. Like, I'm just a cog in the machine, right? So, and I sort of feel bad for Brandon. Like, part of me feels like he could have done more, because of his stature as like a sea level. But at the same time, like, he doesn't have any power really. Like, he just has a job to do. And he has a family, so he doesn't want to jeopardize his kids or his wife or anything, right? So then we get this weird side story in chapter 23 about how Mark, he gets away from the steel mill and he gets this flat tire on like this back road. So he sees this light and he goes through. And what did you think the light was going to be? Because honestly, I was like, anything goes. I had no idea what was coming. But it certainly wasn't a child cult. So he comes in and it's just this bunch of kids with this one guy leading them. And they're a very religious group, kind of getting back to nature, rejecting technology. Almost like, not quite like Amish vibes, but, they don't do any technology. No computers, no phones, nothing. And it was supposed to be like to raise a new generation that would fight against the taking of humanity's soul by the world of technology. Again, we see that whole theme about how technology is warring against the human soul. And, I'm with them. I understand. I totally understand where they're coming from. It was just weird. A bunch of kids. And it was like, I think he said they ranged from 4 to 24 or something like that. So a bunch of young people just living out in the woods, with one dude as their leader. It's very cult-like. But, they find out Mark is not chipped and they sort of just send him on his little merry way. So finally we get, in chapter 25, mind you, we're 5 chapters from the end, we get all of our characters coming together, right? And I didn't really see this coming, because Mark is on his way. He's going through like all the little ways of getting into this group and getting into Canada, meet me here, and kind of very clandestine meetings or whatever. And you find out that Aaron and Clarissa and Max are, all on pretty much the same journey. And they all meet up at this mattress store waiting to get tapped to go row across a lake into Ontario, Canada. And sadly, you find out that Gertrude got captured and Max had to shoot her because she didn't want to be a chip zombie. And, so he's sort of dealing with that, and that's super sad, right? But they all get tapped, and they're getting ready to go, and you find out, like, they have to, not only do they have to canoe across a bunch of lakes, they also have to, like, drag the canoes from lake to lake, so it's this huge deal. It's this huge situation that they have to be in, and it's very, like, physically demanding. Of course, again, predictable, but not disappointing. It can't be that easy. So they get to this one area that they have to canoe across, this one, like, lake, and one of the younger people was like, "Is that thunder?" No. Of course it wasn't thunder. It was helicopters. So you've got Mark there, and he's got his jammer, and who thought that the jammer was going to fall in the water? Yeah, I did. I knew it was going to fall in the water, because he takes down one helicopter by jamming the signal, but then he drops the damn thing in the water. And he's screaming expletives, and I'm screaming expletives. Were you? Did you scream expletives? Because I was like, son of a bitch. I knew it was going to happen, though. Because that thing was too much of a safety for them. It had to be taken out in order for the story to come to its climax. I knew it did. So you find out, and I didn't expect them all to get busted, but they all got busted, and they all got chipped. And I was like, whoa, what's going to happen now? We see that this President Sheridan has lost his damn mind because there's a satellite that controls all these feeds, but the other countries don't have this whole chip thing like the US does, and he thinks that these other countries' satellites are going to shoot down ours or try to take it over so that they can control American minds. So he loses his mind and says he's going to, like, start war and shoot missiles at their satellites and stuff. So everybody's, like, pretty much tripping out. The resistance people, the ones with the chips, are like, whatever you say, master. So they're like, we got to do something. He's going to start World War III. We've got to do something. Essentially, they're joking, like, we got to save the world, right? So we see all of our main characters are in jail. And jail, they have, like, the orange jumpsuits, the very, like, cliche orange jumpsuits. But they have this thing that they put in their chips, like this feed, that's called sandbag, where it makes your body just feel like it's covered in sandbags and you can't do anything. And you see the dynamic of people are super excited that Mark got busted, and they all come to try to ask Mark where he got the jammer. They all come to ask Mark where he got the jammer, and Brandon guy's there, the one who gave him the jammer, but Mark doesn't give him up. Did you think Mark was going to give him up? Because I honestly didn't. I honestly thought, like, Mark is going to keep his word. And they tortured the shit out of Mark, too. Like, electric shocks to his chip and everything. And he still doesn't give him up. Then we start to see Brandon really get into the story. And I did not see this coming. Up until now, I feel like Brandon hadn't been that big of a character. But then you see Brandon like, I'm going to turn your chip feed off. What? Like, before they leave, after, he gets tortured and he doesn't answer him, Brandon, like, whispers to him, like, I'm going to turn your chip feed off. That way you can get the hell out of here. Sure enough, Brandon, he's not like a programmer, but he has access to all that stuff. He's a C-level something. Chief Programming Officer, I think. So he goes to this place that they call the Brain, which is essentially like just the hub of all the chip technology, and goes in and just turns everybody's shit off. Like Aaron, Clarissa, Mark, his family, everybody. And the first thing I'm thinking of is, how many alarm bells is this dude going to set off? Like, and he knows it. He's not dumb. So he calls up his family. He's like, get everybody into the car. He's super clandestine about where they meet. His wife is like, have you lost your damn mind? And so then he gets a message from, like, Mr. Bebop. And you find out that it's Mark, because Bebop was the name of the little, like, jazz club they went to, which I thought was really cool. And so they all meet up. So now you have everybody in one place. Everybody got away. Clarissa, Aaron, Mark, and Brandon, they're all together, and they're discussing, like, what can we do to stop, essentially, World War III. And they get the idea to kidnap the doctor that made the chip, the one that took out Mark's earlier. And they're like, what the hell? Let's do it, right? So they get him. Of course, he has to, they literally have a gun to his head. So they essentially say, like, you either help us or we're going to shoot you. So, your choice. So they all get back to, like, the Brain, the main headquarters, so that the doctor, who has this experimental technology about implanting ideas into people's chips, like, nationwide, Not that that was going to be used for anything nefarious, right? He decides that he tells him, he's like, I can try it, but it might not work. So they get the bright idea to change the president's mind. Instead of shooting down the other, like, international satellites, they're going to shoot down the Dynamica one, which would take down the chip technology. So the doctor's doing it, and you get this, like, race against time because you know, like, they are after Brandon. They know his ass turned all those chips off. And, they're in there, and the doctor's working, and he's like, oh, I've got, like, 10 minutes left, and here come, like, the men in black showing up, and they're running after him, and, and the doctor just right at the last second. Oh, and also, while all this is going on, you got this, like, missile countdown of the crazy-ass president going to shoot this satellite down, and all of a sudden, boom, it works, and you get this thing across the bottom of the news that's like, president decides to shoot down Dynamica satellite. And it works. He does it. So everybody's chip feeds go down, and in the last chapter, you see, like, Aaron's old roommates start walking out, blinking into the sun. Everybody's sort of just waking up. I mean, it's essentially exactly what you would think. Like, people just sort of crawling out of holes and everything. It sort of gives you this, like, where are they now section at the end. And what did you think Mark was going to do? Because I knew he was, as much as they talked about how guilty he felt about Dynamica, I knew he was going to do something with that chip. And sure enough, he does this, like, startup to, even though they can't remove the chip because it's deadly, he gets this whole startup to, like, take it offline, like, super deactivate it to where nobody can touch it again. I was like, well, that's a wonderful use of his ability, honestly. I think there was nothing better they could have had him do. One thing that really, well, two things that got me. One, Wendy, Aaron's wife, wakes up, and she immediately starts bitching that she wants her refund because she got out of her eternal loop, and because she is so atrophied, she literally, like, staggers down the stairs, falls, breaks her neck, and dies. That was a little jarring. But then we see Aaron and Clarissa pretty much just, like, go to the mountains of Montana, and there's been, like, a romance blooming through this whole thing. Like, I mean, that's obvious. And, like, Clarissa gets pregnant. They're super excited to be parents. And then, like, it's this scene where this dude knocks on their door and he's like, hey, I'm your neighbor, just trying to be friendly. And they invite him in. They're, like, having drinks or whatever. And the guy pulls out his phone and is like, hey, check out this new app. And they kick his ass out and are like, don't ever come back. Like, I get it, totally, that you hate technology, whatever. But, I mean, really? I mean, did you think that was an overreaction? I sort of did. I mean, and I get you have been traumatized by some technology, but Lord, like, I don't know, just, I didn't like that. Which I didn't like Clarissa, period. Like, I could totally see her doing that. But Aaron? I liked Aaron. I didn't see him reacting that way. But, so, overall, what did you think of the book? If you read it, comment down below. I really want to know. I liked it. I thought it was a great read. I thought it was an easy read. If you are into dystopian novels, if you liked The Matrix, you're going to love this book. So, again, guys, thank you so much for coming to the first ever Panic Room book review. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.